welcome to the Jazz Drummers Blueprint Podcast, Episode 3. I'm Andy.
And I'm Tim.
And today we're going to discuss whether we think you should or need to go to school for music to become a jazz musician.
Now, truth be told, both of us have our degrees in jazz. Is that correct? I know I do.
Yes.
And
yes.
You went to school for jazz, right?
Yeah. And obviously we've both taken very, very different paths in our lives after we got out of school. So yeah, I think it's totally worth talking about. And what a huge decision for a young musician. Probably we're talking about high school, deciding to go to college, deciding what to major in college. Maybe you're a great musician and majoring in music, majoring in jazz is something you're considering. Maybe you are, hell bent on being, a professional jazz musician. So the question is, do I need to go to school as a music major, as a jazz major, to become a professional jazz musician? That's kind of the heart of this question, I suppose.
Yeah. And I can just answer it right now. No. So that's the short answer. Podcast over. We're done. Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess the difference is do you need to, or is it worthwhile at all? Is it something even worth considering?
So let's just get right into it. So first for me, I don't think you have to be a kid, straight out of high school to go to school for jazz. I do remember there was, when I was at William Patterson, there was somebody that came in, he was an alto player, I believe, and he was in his 30s. And he came and decided he wanted to become a jazz musician and was able to go to William Patterson. And yeah, I don't know what happened to him, but that's what he did. And it was kind of cool because he had a van and he was able to take us into New York a little bit easier than other people. But
I might argue that a 30-year-old is still a kid at this point in my life.
I'm not mad at you on that one either, but you are more of a formed adult at 30 than you are at 18. So, but going back to the younger kid situation, because parents say you need to go to college and you have to go and do all these things, and a lot of times, like, I went to college as a jazz musician because that's all I ever wanted to do, and I saw that as a path to go and do it. So I teach a lot of high school kids, and I've taught a lot of elite high school kids, and I've taught people that have gone on to schools like William Patterson, Manhattan School of Music, the New School, SUNY Purchase, and Juilliard, just to name a few. So I have some experience in this, and I can definitely tell you that I also have students that have gone and not gone to school for jazz and done fairly well as well. So it doesn't really seem to matter all that much, and that's the real truth of the matter. I will say that, like, for me, I have a certain list of criteria that I like to tell all my students, or like to give all my students before they choose a college. And that criteria, I think, is what's really important. And Andy, I know that you did some research and you have some numbers on tuition, which I think is like the number one thing that we have to concern ourselves with if you're going to advise someone to go to school for music. So do you have the numbers for some of the tuitions at some of the great schools? Did you want to talk about that first?
I do. And I just did a little bit of research. I didn't spend a lot of time, obviously, just what I could come up with on Google. And, keep in mind, these numbers are constantly changing, right? Like every semester, the prices change. The numbers that I have here are based
as of April 2025 is when this was recorded, right?
I believe the numbers I have are for the 2025 tuition. Yes.
Okay.
And it is tuition only. So we'll talk just about tuition. That does not include, books or any other materials.
Room and board and all that stuff.
It does not include lodging. Yeah. So obviously, some places are a lot more expensive than others, for rent, food, necessities for life. So, the numbers that we're going to be talking about right here are tuition only. So the question, or the name that always comes up, right, when we're talking about jazz college,
Berklee College of Music.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I'm sure Berklee is very happy about that. But they seem to be kind of like tied directly to, if someone says, "Hey, jazz college," they think Berklee pops into their mind.
Actually, I think it's music college at this point too. One of the things that I love about Berklee, and I'm not generally a huge fan of Berklee, but one of the things that I do love about Berklee is that they offer so many different areas of study in music, right? So like if you wanted to go and study East Indian classical music and come out with a degree in that, you can get that at Berklee. Whereas, you know, places like William Patterson, for example, you just get your degree in jazz pretty much, you know. So yeah, Berklee's really flexible. And that's one of the things I really like about that school. So go
Well,
ahead, Andy, tell me
and
more.
they're really, you know, renowned in particular for uh, the teachers, right? I mean, they tend to attract, you know, the best of the best. I mean, not saying that other schools don't have a lot of the best too, but you know, the teachers there at Berklee are just, you know, top notch, pretty much guaranteed. So anyway, we'll just throw out some numbers here. So what I came up with for Berklee for this calendar year, which is 2025 right now, $54,000 a year. So that would be 2 semesters. So for 1 year, and that's tuition only. So
Okay.
times 4, right? So
Yeah.
talking 215, $16,000. I'm bad at math,
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah. So that's and someone had thrown out a number I heard somewhere, I don't know where, on the internet. You know, it's like, oh, you go to Berklee, you got to spend $400,000, and I was like, whoa, really? $400,000? That sounds crazy. But take that number, right, of 216, right, and then add on top of that room and board,
Oh yeah.
you know, and
Easily another
that,
20 grand a year.
oh yeah, so that number is not as far in the stratosphere as you think it might be. I mean, it's maybe a
Yeah.
little high, but it's a lot of money. So okay, so Berklee, $54,000 a year tuition, and the national average tuition, and I'm assuming this includes, you know, all colleges, is $48,000 a year.
Okay.
That's a lot. I mean, that's so.
Steep.
I won't get into how old I am, but it's a
Yeah.
lot different than it was,
Man.
you know, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So just throwing out some others. Now, Berkeley's not the most expensive. Manhattan School of Music, $58,000 a year tuition.
Yep. I have a student that is a freshman there right now. And man, it was a struggle for them to figure out how to do that. And yeah, I'm glad they did, because he's working on it, and it's something that he really wanted. But yeah, that amount stings.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Juilliard, 56,000.
Right.
Okay. And now, and remember too, so these are just the tuition numbers if you come in and you pay. I think most of these schools that we're talking about right now, it's the same whether you're in or out of state. A lot of state schools, there's different tier pricing depending on whether you're a resident of the state or not. We'll talk about
Well,
that
these
in a
are
minute.
private schools too. Juilliard and Manhattan School and Berkeley are all private schools. They're not state schools. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think, but there is, I think there is a fair amount of financial aid possibilities, right? So depending
Yeah.
on, you know, where you're at and the kind of scholarships that you might be able to get. So we can't really get into that because that's, you know, so personal. I think we can just kind of talk top level. This
Well,
is
and
what.
that varies a lot too, you know.
Yeah.
So it varies by student and things like that. I do know that Juilliard does offer like full tuition scholarships. There's places like UOP and Sacramento and Stockton, which have the jazz ambassadors that offer full tuition rides. They don't pay for room and board, but they, you know, for very select musicians, there are these full tuition scholarships. Going back to Berklee, I'd be curious to know. I know one thing that kind of plagues Berklee, though, it's like, you know, you say it's $400,000 a year, but their graduation rate is pretty low. Did you look at that? Did you check out the
No,
graduation rate?
no, but you know, we all know the stories, right? Of people going and
Right.
getting picked up and go on tour, and they went to school for a
Well,
year
that's
or
not why the
2.
graduation rate is low, though. That's
Oh,
for the very few. Now, the
right.
graduation rate there is low because it's very expensive, and a lot of people
Oh, yeah,
want to go to Berkeley. And you know, there's a lot of, I hate to generalize it, but there's a lot of guitar players, that, especially that go to Berkeley, and rock musicians that just don't know how to be in college for music without going for jazz or classical. And Berkeley is one of those places that offers metal. Like you can go and study metal guitar, metal drums, and you can get really, really good at that stuff at Berkeley. But there's also the cost, right? So like, you know, if you have to spend that $400,000 to shred on a guitar, that's probably kind of your only option, really, you know? And so a lot of people go there for about a year and then kind of drop out and go do their own thing for a little while. Excuse me, I tell you, getting over this cold, man. So, yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed about Berkeley, though, is that is their graduation rate is quite low, and I forget what it is. So people like to go there, get the experience, and then get out. I do know. That being said, I do know a few people that have graduated from Berkeley.
Yeah, so, as well as I do. But I think that there is less expensive alternatives, right? So well, my alma mater is more expensive now than I thought it was going to be. Temple University in Philadelphia. I went there. I think the jazz studies program was only in its like third year when I started, so it was a pretty new thing. And I mean, it was dirt cheap when I went. But now the tuition at Temple, if you're an in-state student, is $22,000 a year.
That is a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, I feel like it's a great school, and I certainly would, that would be a place I might recommend. I mean, the jazz program there is incredible now. Justin Faulkner is the guy over there for drums. So $22K, that's in-state. Out-of-state tuition is $37K, so that bumps it up a little bit. I did look at William Patterson, and I forgot to write it down. It's less than that. It's less than that.
William Patterson has always been so. William Patterson is the little secret of the jazz programs. I don't know how many of you out there know about this school, but when I went there, on the West Coast, like I came from California and nobody had heard of William Patterson. I only knew about Berkeley. I almost went to Berkeley, to be honest. Like I got a scholarship to go there and I was all set, but something didn't feel right. So I decided not to. And I stayed and I went to the local college here, which is Sac State, which at the time cost about $500 a semester. And I mean, I think it was $1,000 a semester and I had a $500 scholarship to go. So I went to then I went to Sac State and then I went to William Patterson. And the reason I was able to go was because it was about the same cost as Sac State. It's so little known. And when I got in, I know the program's grown since there, but when I got in, I was one of 60 students, 60 jazz students, not 60 drummers, but 60 jazz students. John Riley taught there. Rufus Reed taught there. Conrad Herwig, like all the cats, Joe Lovano. It was really incredible. And that program was started by Thad Jones. And so to be able to get into a program like that and be able to, and then you start looking at the alumni too, right? I mean, Bill Stewart went there, Carl Allen, just to name a few. And then more recently, Mark Juliana, Jonathan Blake, me. I don't really count, but so there's the amount of really great people that went there was just mind blowing. And to be able to get that education for such a low cost was really the secret, because there's so many places like Berkeley and these other schools, New School, for example. That one's, I think is that up around, did you do that one? That one's like around 55, right?
Yeah, I don't have that on my list, but yeah, I'm sure it's right in that area.
So all these teachers, kind of like the same teachers that went to, I feel like I'm doing an ad for William Patterson right now, but all these teachers that were teaching at William Patterson were also teaching at these other schools that were larger and cost a lot more money. So, if you can get into a program like a William Patterson or a SUNY Purchase or some of these smaller schools like Hart School in Connecticut, then those are the lesser expensive schools generally than places like Manhattan and Berkeley and all that. So, yeah. It's crazy, right?
The bottom line is, though, that there are less expensive alternatives that might give you a, I don't know if I'd say better education, but a good education, not just for the music classes that you're taking, but also these are schools that are colleges that aren't just conservatories. So, you can take other classes. You can hang out with people that aren't musicians. Maybe that's a healthy thing to do.
And that was great. That was one of the things that was great about William Patterson, too, is that you were at a normal college, right? So your friends, the people that were outside the music department were normal New Jerseyans. And so if there is such a thing, right? So, being from California, that was a bit of a culture shock. Hey, hey, you're from Cali. What are you doing here? So
well, I'm from New Jersey, so
I know you are.
I know. But yeah, no, there is some schools that are really, they're good deals, as it were, because you're going to get a good education. We have a local school here that has a jazz program. Western Carolina University. It's near a town called Silva, Western North Carolina. In-state tuition, $4,500 a semester.
Wow. Yeah.
$4,500. That is a bargain. I mean, I don't know the teachers there. I met someone whose son is studying jazz there, and they said that they've been pretty happy with it so far. But I mean, the bottom line is, if you are thinking about going to school for music, look into many, many different schools, especially if money is a real issue for you. I mean, obviously, if you have the means and you don't have to worry about coming out with a lot of debt, by all means, go to the best school possible with the best teachers possible. But that's not the majority of people. And okay, so here's the thing, again, getting right to the point is, if you go to school for music, not just jazz, but any kind of music, and you come out with a massive debt, and this is one of the country's big problems, right? I mean, this is not just musicians; this is everyone.
Almost anything. You could almost be a dentist now, and
have problems. It's crazy. But think about your earnings potential, right? I mean, think about earnings potential of going to school to be a dentist. I mean, obviously they have to go to, it's more than a 4-year degree, but how long is it going to take you to pay that off?
Well,
what is the potential?
I have a couple of friends who are dentists, and they went to school, and this is hearsay because this is what they told me a couple of years ago. And I remember this because I was like, wow, that's crazy. But combined, they're a married couple, combined their dental education, put them in about $1 million worth of debt. So it's very expensive to become a dentist. It's very expensive to become a doctor. It is very expensive to become some of these traditional, roles in society. So, when you think about music, it almost seems like it's a bargain. However, exactly what you're saying, their earnings potential, right? So, I mean, dentists, they're making a significant chunk, whereas musicians, there's some problems with the way that music is taught. And one of those is that their music is still taught, and it's expected that you get out of school and you will get hired by a symphony, or you get hired by a band that's on the road, and you have a job and you're able to go and play music. Buddy Rich used to hire people out of North Texas all the time, right? Glenn Miller, same thing. Maynard Ferguson, people would come out of North Texas. You would have a job on the road. You could pay back your college education. Classical musicians can get out of college and get a job in a symphony. And they get a job in the symphony. That's a W-2. It pays pretty well, and they can pay down their debt. Jazz musicians these days are getting out, and I can probably speak a little bit to classical musicians as well. If you don't get one of those W-2 positions, because they're fewer and farther between, they are just not that out there. If you don't get one of those, then you are now an entrepreneur. You are running your own business. And that is very rarely taught. I think it's starting to become more taught in the world. But as a musician, when you get out of college, you have to realize that you are going to be in charge of your own income. And that means even if you're hired by a band, you're still going to have to play in more bands. You're going to have to do more things. You're going to have to teach. You're going to have to engineer. You can all the different hats that you can have in music in order to make a living is what you're going to have to do. And I feel like that's one of my gripes with music education is that it's not always taught that way. We're so concerned with the notes that we don't pay attention to the business, right? So there's that part. One of the things I'd like to get into as well is I do want to talk about my criteria for choosing a school and what it is. And so it kind of goes into our topic. My number one criteria is how much is it going to cost and how much debt are you going to have on the other side of it? So going back to that again, obviously we've spent a lot of time on it already, but if you are able to get out of school with zero debt and you're able to go and play and make music without the worry of having to pay back these student loans, then you are going to be set up for a lot more success than anybody that has $400,000 worth of Berkeley debt on their shoulders. Because guess what? That's, unless you're going to go out with some even crazy rock bands at this point, they're not hiring the same way they used to. They're not paying the musicians the way they used to. A few of them are, but a lot of these acts are not paying their musicians what they're worth. And so it's even playing for huge artists is not necessarily going to pay back that 400 grand really fast. So, you know, the harsh reality of it is that you do have to seek out alternative ways of becoming a musician. And one of the best ways, Andy, you mentioned the school that you were talking about, the 4,500, at least in California, the public community colleges are free now. And so here's the thing, folks. It's the same 12 notes, right? So that's what it is. These basic musicianship classes, the jazz history, or maybe not jazz history, but the music history, theory 1, ear training 1, all the stuff that you have to take as a first year or two students, all your piano classes, all that stuff, you can knock out at a community college. And then find a school that has reciprocity with that community college that you want to go to. So, in fact, you go to the community college for 2 years for free, knowing that you're going to transfer to this other college. So knowing, you have to be careful with that, because it's not always the case where you're able to do that, especially transferring between states. If you have like an in-state college, if you want to stay in California, if you go to community college for the first 2 years and you want to transfer to like a UC, or another great school in California is CSU Northridge, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go to your community college, knock out your first few years of your music classes, and then you transfer over to Northridge in the second 2 years, you can save so much money with that. It's ridiculous. So that's a way to get a music degree. Now, so the criteria is, number one, don't spend too much on a music degree. Never come out of a music degree with debt. If you come out with any sort of debt, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So number two, location. Where do you think that you want to live? Where are you going to be? Do you want to make music in LA? Do you want to try and break into the studio scene, break in and just do, whatever's in LA, all the different things that are there. Maybe you want to work in Disneyland, right? So you go to school in LA because you're going to start putting down roots. And that's what I love about college is it's a place where you start putting down roots. And you start to have your network. And so college is a great way to get to a city that you've always wanted to live in. So you go to college in those cities and you put down your roots, your musical roots and your professional roots, and hopefully your career will start to blossom from there. So if you want to go to LA, go to LA. If you want to go to New York, go to New York. If you want to go to New Orleans, go to New Orleans. If these are places that you want to do and want to live and make music, then that's where you should go to school. Visit those cities before you make that decision. Always have a good idea of where you want to be before you make that decision. The next criteria that I have is look at the student body, right? Look at the people that have come out, the alumni and the current students. In this day and age with YouTube and everything, find the schools that you want to go to and look up their combo/jazz recitals on YouTube and listen to the caliber and the quality of music that is coming out of those schools. The higher the caliber and the students that inspire you, the more you're going to work, even more so than for the teachers, because teachers are great, but your peers are what are going to make you better. So if you go to a school like Northridge, or if you go to a school like William Patterson or Juilliard, and you type in and you look at their combo performances, or Eastman or any of those places, right? You look at their combo performances and you're like, wow, this is incredible. I can't believe that these are the musicians I get to play with. And that's a school that you want to go to. The next criteria, of course, is the faculty. Know who your faculty is. Like, I went to William Patterson because John Riley taught there. Like, that was it. That's all you had to say, So William Patterson was so perfect for me. there's a lot of places that people say they want to go to school there, and I'll ask them, why do you want to go to school there? Who's on faculty? And they'll say, well, I don't really know. And if they say that, then like, what's the point? Like, you have to know who you're going to be studying from. Look up their studying style. Have they written books? Are they somebody? Look up their teaching style. Make sure that you're compatible with their teaching style, because I know a lot of people that studied with Ed Soph that have some stories, we'll call it. But Ed Soph is an incredible teacher. So, it's just like when you get into sports, right? Like, is it Bobby Knight or John Wooden? Who are you going to get? And if you work under that kind of Bobby Knight pressure, see, if kids are listening to this, they have no idea who either of these people are. But Bobby Knight was like an angry, he'd give you the shirt off his back if you were performing for him. But if you weren't, he would throw a chair at you. And John Wooden was just the opposite. He was somebody that would nurture you and help you realize your true potential. And so find out because names are names, but is their teaching style compatible for you? So to recap really quick, cost, that's number one. Location, number two. Number three is the student body. Number four is who's teaching there, right? So that's the criteria for me. That's what I give all my students every single time they're asking about colleges, and it seemed to work really well. I've had really great success with a lot of students going off to college. Now, the other question, Andy, that we posed is it worth it? Do you need to go to school for music, right? What say you? I've been talking a lot. What say you?
No, it's fantastic. I mean, that whole last bit, man, that's the exact information that I was hoping we could get out there with this thing. I mean, if you're, in high school thinking about going to college for music, I mean, everything that you just said is such valuable information and things to think about. Super important. I would say, so in my mind, okay, so are you better served to go to school for music and come out with a music degree, Bachelor of Music degree? What's the value difference between doing that or going to school and getting a liberal arts degree, maybe at a community college, but having like the private instructor that is the person who is, as far as your instrument is concerned, is going to get you to a similar place. What's the difference between those two things? Why might you want to go one route versus the other?
So I've got an answer for that too. So I think in this day and age, you have to really understand why you're going to school. And so one of the things about going to school for jazz is that a lot of people think that they're going to go and study their instrument, right? So myself included, when I went to school for jazz, I was like, oh, I'm going to study drums. I'm going to practice 100 hours a day and I'm going to get really good at drums. I couldn't have been more wrong. So the first thing that you have to understand is that when you go to school for a performance degree or a music degree, you're going to school for music first, your instrument second, right? So you're going to need to know all your modes. You're going to have to know all your scales. You're going to have to be able to do your Bach part writing. You're going to have to learn about Monteverdi and all this Gregorian chant and going back to the very beginnings of music, because you, at the end of this, are going to have to be an expert on music. And you might be thinking, as I was when I was a young, impressionable teenager when I went to college for the first time, what is this shit? Why am I having to do this? And the thing is that you just have to learn about music, right? So that's the big issue with going to school for music, is that you are going to be going to school for music, not necessarily your instrument. And then on top of that, of course, you have to learn how to play your instrument. You have to play your instrument and get good at it while practicing piano a bunch, practicing vibes. If you're going for a classical degree, you're going to be, if your drum instrument is drum set, you have to learn a lot of other instruments, right? So the value in that is that you become a little bit more diverse, right? If you were to not go to school, of course, you wouldn't, unless you were really, really great at being a self-motivator, you probably aren't going to learn about Gregorian chant. You probably aren't going to learn as much about Bach part writing and some of the other earlier aspects of music. You can teach yourself theory. You can get theory coaches and piano coaches and all that stuff. But the majority of the traditional schooling. That's actually the part that everybody gets in junior college too, right? So if you went to a community college and studied all that stuff, you could do that for free, right? So that part of college is what you get, and you can do that for free in the community colleges. It's the stuff beyond that, right? So now we're into like your performances, your combos, your private lessons, then the student body that you get to play with, right? So the real benefit of going to a college is this. You are, especially if you go to a top college like Manhattan School, Juilliard, William Patterson, any of those, if you go to a top college, you are amongst the next rising stars of music. I know this because I went to college with some of the rising stars, or now the stars of music, right? So Mark Juliana, Jonathan Blake, all these guys, they were at William Patterson as students when I was there as a student as well. And, if you go to these colleges, that's your network, okay? So your network becomes that of great musicians, and you're in that network, you're in that alumni association, you have that net of people that you can talk to, which I think, and that you have something in common with, which is very, very, very valuable. Can you do that without college? Yeah. How do you do it without college? Jam sessions. You move to the city, you move to the place, you skip the whole tuition part and you move to the location where you want to live, and you start going and I don't want to say pestering, but you find the musicians that you want to play with, you take lessons from them, you learn all their music, you get in there and you put yourself in that circle, and you offer to help them take their gear off, and just become friends. And you have to be able to create your own network in that place, because it's not given to you by college. So what you have to do then is you're creating your own network, and you have to be valuable to the community. I was just doing this recording with this great trombonist, and she used to be a trombone player for Buddy Rich. I forget, like just Harry James. Like, she was everywhere. She was absolutely incredible, amazing trombonist. And we were talking about school, and she went to UCLA for law. And she went there at a time when John Wooden was the coach for basketball, and he turned everybody around, right? That's when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, before he was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was going to school there. So she was there, and she studied law, got her bachelor's, master's, and then law degree, all from UCLA. And it was funny because she said something that was really interesting. She said she wanted to go to school for music. And then somebody said, "You're in LA. Why would you go to school for music? You're amongst all the best musicians. Go to school for something else and learn how to play music." And so sure enough, that's what she did. She went out to all the clubs, and then, next thing you know, she's on the bandstand with all those cats, with Buddy Rich and everybody else. So yeah, I don't necessarily think, I think it depends a lot on your personality. You know what else you can do if you're worried about developing your skills? You can join the Jazz Drummers Blueprint, which is actually kind of an interesting thing, because these things like mine and other people's are starting to pop up, and it's an alternative to going to college for music. It's in a way, you're learning the very same things that are taught in college at a much reduced rate, and you're developing a network of drummers, at least, that will help you get to where you want to go in the music and be a support system for you in that way. So check out the Jazz Drummers Blueprint if you're looking to get better at playing some jazz. Enough commercials.
Well, I'll add to that, and I would say that the Jazz Drummers Blueprint, the material that you're teaching in there is very, very much like college level curriculum stuff. That you might be studying with a private teacher.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, and also I would say as a young musician, it'd be cool to study some of that stuff. Before you go to audition for music school, if that was going to be your path.
And that's another topic that we could talk about is your auditions, right? So I
Mm.
have a whole formula for getting you into college too, which is I
Oh,
think maybe Jazz Drums Blueprint 2, you know, we'll see if that might come up into something else that
yeah,
I package for people.
that's a really good idea, because I was personally not prepared to go to school for music. I decided late. I think I was a junior in high
Yeah.
school when I all of a sudden decided I wanted to, go to school for music.
Yeah, I
Um,
decided when I was 6. So
yeah. Well,
maybe
I wanted to be
maybe
a
I was
drummer. I wanted to be a drummer, but I didn't even know you could go to school for jazz,
yeah.
until, towards the end of high school. And I was not prepared. My reading was terrible. I didn't have any, piano or keyboard instrument experience. So I had to try to, learn a little bit. And actually, I only got in on like a probationary,
Mm.
uh, for the first semester or so. So it wasn't until, I got there, they were nice enough to allow me to do that. It was good, and worked out fine. But if you do have to start studying other things than just your instrument, I think if you're going to be, ready to audition for college, especially if there's any kind of competition involved, if it's the kind of school that, is competitive to get into.
Right.
And I would say, for drummers, one thing, obviously you want to study drums, you want to, get as good as you can, learn the style, learn jazz, right? I mean, if you're going to go to school for jazz, you should, listen to
You
it.
should know jazz. You should be
Yeah.
able to speak jazz. Yeah.
Listen to jazz. But also, learning a keyboard instrument, particularly
Mhm.
piano, would be the number one thing. A lot of people think it's like, oh, I got to learn how to play marimba or whatever.
No. In jazz
Yeah,
school, it's piano. In jazz school,
yeah.
it's 100% piano. You have to be able to play. I mean, I was terrible at piano. I still am terrible at piano, but I tried. But we had to. Our final was playing in a jazz trio without music, playing tunes with a jazz trio without music, having to comp, solo, and trade with the drummer and bass player. And I couldn't. I missed the without music part, and I just totally bombed it. It was awful. So yeah, no, that's, I mean, I highly always recommend that for my students that are looking at getting into college. If you're a younger musician trying to get into college, start taking piano lessons, especially as a drummer. Just start taking piano lessons. You're going to need it if you don't
And
already.
you will never regret it. I can guarantee you'll never
Never.
regret it. You'll learn so much, and you'll be a better drummer because of it. Guaranteed.
Absolutely. Yeah. You'll learn tunes. You'll be able to learn tunes faster. You'll be able to remember melodies better. Yeah. I mean, there's just so many benefits. You'll be able to like talk to the other musicians. Like I love it when I offer up chord changes to musicians that I'm playing with, and they're like, "Aren't you the drummer?" Like, yeah, but we can know chords. So yeah, it's really it's super important. So anything else to add, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, once again, we've come up with these topics to talk about. It's like, boy, we could talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah.
I think all of that information, that you said about, thinking about choosing a school, that's just fantastic. I think the the jury's out whether it's, something that you should do, have to do. Well, you don't have to. Let's put it that way. You
I
don't
mean, I
have to
think
go to school for music.
college is so different with these devices that we have. That information, we're in the information age, right? And college was the gateway to information in the past, up until the 1990s when the internet started really popping up. It was, college was your gateway to information. And nowadays there is so much information, and thinking about it, like just through YouTube and Instagram, all the drummers that are coming out, I mean, I didn't sound like that when I was that age. I didn't know, some of the things that everybody seems to know. And there's this race for information and being able to say, oh yeah, I know this Philly Joe Jones solo, and I know this Papa Joe Jones solo, and I know this Art Blakey solo. And there's just all this information that's out there, and it's making musicians better ish, or they're making them good at knowing and repeating information, right? And so I don't know what college is going to look like, because there's so many things that we learned or could have learned in college that are being learned on the internet every single day. So we're getting into the philosophy of what's going to happen in the future, right? Which we can't really tell, but AI is not coming for jazz. Hopefully that wasn't a terrible statement, but yeah, hopefully that one ages well. But yeah, I think with information, college is kind of college is changing. That much I know.
Yeah. I would say too that, you know, jazz as a major in college has not been around that long. I mean, there's, a couple of schools that have a pretty deep history with it, but in general, 35 years, something like that, since
Longer than that. It was
a little,
Berkeley
little
College
longer.
of Music. Berkeley was kind of first. I think their program was started in the 70s or 80s. Uh, University of North Texas or North Texas College, I think is what it was back in the day. They've been around for super long time with the jazz program. William Patterson's jazz program was started in the 80s, I believe. So there's jazz programs have been around. That leads us to the whole other issue of jazz in school. So, oh man, we're going down the next topic right here, kind of. But here's what's happening, and this is the problem with college. One of the other problems with college, as determined by this guy. So, the big problem that I see with jazz educations is that kids go and they get their bachelor's degree in jazz. There are no jobs. Kids get their master's degree in jazz. Still no jobs. Kids get their doctorate degree in jazz. Well, I can teach. And so what they do is they open up a jazz program now jazz programs are everywhere, right? So, and you can get a degree in jazz in almost any college, right? So they open up a jazz program at a school in, I don't know, I'm just going to say Utah. And no offense to anybody in Utah, but we all know that Utah is probably not the jazz capital of the world, or even Sacramento here, right? So it's kind of what happened here in Sacramento. But so they open up a program here in Sacramento, and they get other people that have studied jazz in college, not people that have been on the road, not people that have been living jazz and music as a life, right? As a lifestyle, as their career. So that's another thing that you really have to consider are the people that are in the jazz program that you're going to, are they people that have been on the road with people? Are they people that have studied with the great musicians? Are they the people that actually have that kind of knowledge? Or are they people that kind of just went through a few jazz programs and ended up with a doctorate degree? What have they done? Where are they going? What's going on? So I call those the feral jazz cats. It's like where, you have to be careful with your education. You're a consumer if you're buying an education. So you have to know how to consume it. And that's the case with that stuff. You got to be really, really careful with it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I would say too, all the stuff we've been talking about is for essentially a performance degree, right? Like a jazz performance degree. I mean, I think most of it, right, you're going to get a Bachelor of Music degree. If you're getting a 4-year degree, it's going to be a Bachelor of Music. And then, underneath that, it's going to say, jazz performance or something like that.
Right.
If you are interested and want to make a career of being an educator, then you do have to go to school for music education. Like you need to have that degree to get a job, and the higher level of education you have, the better job you can get. All this different stuff. So that's kind of not what we're talking about with this podcast, because we're talking about
to be for the jazz education degree or the education degree too. Another thing to really be careful with is get your degree where you want to teach, right? Mm. So if you want to live in California and you get your degree in Texas, you are not going to be able to, they don't have reciprocity between Texas and California. So if you take their credential program and you get credentialed in Texas, then when you come to California, you're going to have to take the credential, the CSET, I think is what it's called. You have to take that all over again to be able to be licensed to teach in California. So be careful with that if you do want to go for education. Just know where you want to live. and like Andy said too, the higher your degree, the more money you get paid in public schools and things like that. And then of course you can teach, in community colleges and do those things, So nothing wrong with taking that route as being a musician. So.
Oh, it's fantastic. That's a special kind of person because, most of those jobs don't pay a lot of money, and the people who are really passionate about that, they can, and they're good at it. They can really make a nice difference to a lot of folks.
It's really funny is especially in elementary school music and things like that. I mean, that's where the spark is, right? This is a funny one, Andy, because this is kind of on topic too. The full-time faculty position in colleges has become the new record contract. Did you know that? So man, you would not believe, and I'm not going to name names, but you would not believe the names that get dropped in for full-time faculty positions at colleges. When they come up, you would not, some of the most famous jazz musicians, will put in for those. So it's fascinating because you land a full-time faculty position, you're set. You got benefits, you got a steady salary, you've got enough time to tour and still do all the things that you want to do. So that's, it's an interesting thing. Larnell Lewis, full-time faculty up in Canada, I mean, it's the way to be. If you have a family and you don't want to be on the road all the time, man, full-time faculty. It's the new record contract.
But you gotta want to teach. That's a problem. I think that a lot of musicians, they might be great musicians, but they might not be the greatest teachers. So if you're going to go that route, or you have aspirations for that route, hopefully you'll have a spark and a real desire to teach and help people in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot, and hopefully you're not more confused than you were when you started listening to this one. And this has been a lot of fun, Andy.
It's a lot to think about. So I guess the bottom line is, we don't know. It's whether it's right for you. It's such an individual thing. The number one thing I guess, we'll leave with is really, how much is it going to cost? If you want to go to music school, you got to figure that out. You got to figure out, if you can remain debt free, or at least come out with as little debt as possible, then maybe it's worth it. But if, you want to go to school and you're going to come out with this huge debt, you got to play a lot of $100 gigs when you get out of school to pay off, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And unfortunately, the money we're getting paid for jazz gigs isn't really going up, hasn't gone up in a while. So that's another topic.
Let me end with the story here. This is a story that I love, and I'm not going to name names, but it was one of my more well-known faculty members at William Patterson. I saw him. I went to one of his gigs at Smalls when I was there. This is in the 90s. And I went to his gig at Smalls. And this was before I came home for a Christmas vacation or something, right? So it was like a day or two before I came home. And I saw this guy pay the band. And everybody there made $100 at Smalls. And I was like, man, what am I doing? I'm going home, and I got this gig lined up that pays $250. I'm making more than my teachers on this gig, and I'm sure they have gigs, and I've played many gigs that pay way more than $100. But that was the moment that I realized, what is this? How do I make this better for myself? Am I going to be playing? I used to say, and this was my anecdote, I make my living $100 at a time. And it's so true. And fortunately, things have changed a lot since I used to say that. But as a professional musician, that's what you can expect. So choose wisely with your colleges and with how you get your education, right? Because you're going to make, at least for a while, you're going to make your living $100 at a time. So,
all right, good. Well, that's. We'll wrap that one up. And I'm sure there's a lot of kind of like spin-off subjects here that I'm
Oh
sure
man,
we'll
we
get
could
to in
go
the near
forever.
future. Yeah, yeah. Right.
Absolutely, Andy. All right. Well, everybody, please be sure to check out the Jazz Drummers Blueprint if you want to get better at playing the drums. Andy, it's been a real pleasure talking to you about this stuff. It's obviously, you can tell that I'm very passionate about it, and I know you are too. So this has been a lot of fun.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you on the next one.